Hey guys, today's lesson is over circumference of circles. You will need to go ahead and find you a calculator before we get started because you're going to need it on every problem today. This addresses standard 7GB3, which is not a new standard. It's also the one we used when doing area of circles. So circumference of circle means the distance around the circle. So it's very similar to perimeter. When we talk about the perimeter of quadrilaterals and triangles and things like that, we're talking about the distance around the outside. However, a circle is a little bit more difficult to calculate the perimeter or the circumference because it's round. It's not got lengths of edges that you can measure. So again, the circumference of a circle is just the distance around the outside of a circle. In our previous lesson, we talked about the area of a circle, which was how much space was filled in on the inside of that circle. But circumference is going to be the distance around the outside of it. Okay, so our formula for circumference of a circle, you're going to need to write this down because we're going to use it on every problem today. So C equals pi d. You can use C equals pi d, where d is the diameter, or we can use C equals 2 pi r. Now, again, you're welcome to use either of those. I will try and make myself use 2 pi r some just to show you how. However, I usually just use pi times the diameter because that one just seems a little bit easier to remember. C equals pi d rather than 2 pi r. I want you to recognize how those two formulas are the same. So we know that if a diameter, and I'm just making this up, is say 4, then the radius is 2. So the only thing that's happening here is 2 times the radius is the same as the diameter. Okay, so they're the same exact formula. It's just that one of them is set up for if you're being given the radius, and the other one is if you're using diameter. So let's look at example 1. It says the diameter of a circle, okay, remember that diameter is the distance all the way through that circle, is 8 feet. So what is the circle's circumference? Okay, so again, our formula for circumference, write this down every time so that you'll get used to using it and therefore memorize it, is C equals pi times the diameter. So to find the circumference, we're going to use 3.14 for pi multiplied by the diameter, which is 8. So again, I told you to find you a calculator. Go ahead and grab that calculator now, and we're going to enter 3.14 times 8, and we get 25.12 feet. So the circumference, or the distance around that circle, is 25.12. Now, in example 2, I'm going to work this one 2 different ways because I want you to see how either of those formulas that I gave you can be used here. So again, I told you I almost always use pi d. However, in this formula, in this problem, it's telling us the radius. So we can see that halfway through this circle here is a radius of 2 meters. So we could use this C equals 2 pi r. So 2 times 3.14 times our radius, which is halfway through that circle, is 2. So then you would use your calculator and do 2 times 3.14 times 2, and you would get 12.56. However, I told you that I almost always just stick with using pi d. However, if I'm going to use pi d, I have to know the diameter and not the radius. However, it's pretty easy to look and say, okay, if the radius is 2, the diameter is twice that, so our diameter would be 4. So then I can just calculate using the other formula, 3.14 multiplied by the diameter of 4, which would also give me 12.56. So you're welcome to use either one of those formulas. You should see how the two relate now. You're going to get the same answer regardless. You've just got to know when you're plugging those numbers into your formula if you're using the radius or the diameter. Go ahead and pause your video and try example 3. So the diameter of a circle is 6 centimeters, so that means the distance all the way through this circle. What is the circle's circumference? So I'm going to use C equals pi d. So pi is 3.14, and our diameter is 6. So we'll use a calculator here. 3.14 times 6 is 18.84. And that is centimeters. Remember, we're talking about circumference, so that 18.84 is telling us the distance around the outside of this circle. Okay, pause your video and go ahead and try examples 4 and 5. Okay, in example 4, this is the kind of problem that I'm talking about. It's giving you the radius. So most of you, or some of you, may want to use that formula of C equals 2 pi r. However, I told you that I prefer to just continue using pi d. However, it's important that I recognize that my radius, according to this problem, my radius is 3 feet. So if my radius is 3, then my diameter is twice that, which is 6. So when I put my numbers into my formula here, I'm not going to use that radius of 3 because I'm using pi d. So I have to use my diameter, which is 6. So we're going to do 3.14 times 6 again and get 18.84. And this one is feet. In number 5, the diameter of a circle is 32 miles. So what is the circle's circumference? So C equals pi d. Okay, I need to be careful here when I'm plugging into my diameter. Was I given the diameter or the radius in my problem? I was given the diameter, so I don't need to do anything to that number. That's the one that I need. So use your calculator, and you're going to do 3.14 multiplied by 32, and you'll get 100.48. And that is miles. Okay, in number 6, it says the radius of a circle is 19 inches. What is the circle's circumference? Again, this is one of those like I'm talking about where I still use pi d, even though the question is telling me the radius. If you're more comfortable using C equals 2 pi r when you're given the radius, that's perfectly fine. But I'm noticing that the radius is 19. So I need to know what the diameter is if I'm going to plug that into this C equals pi d formula. So if the radius is 19, the diameter is twice that, so that is 38. So C equals 3.14 multiplied by my diameter of 38. So we're going to calculate that. 3.14 multiplied by 38 gives you 119.32, and this one is inches. Now I want you to pay close attention here in number 7, because this is some of the problems you're going to see as you get into probably the 70s or 80s on your SMART score. It's telling you the circumference, okay? On all the problems 1 through 6 so far, we've been solving for the circumference. However, in this one, it's going to go ahead and tell you the circumference. So you're still using that formula of C equals pi d, but now instead of solving for the C, the circumference, we already know that our circumference is 100.48. So we're going to plug in 100.48 for C. We know that pi is 3.14, but this time the question is asking us for the diameter. So we're solving for the diameter. Remember, there's multiply between 3.14 and D. So this goes back to when we were solving one-step equations. How do we get our variable D by itself? Well, we've got to get rid of 3.14. So it's currently being multiplied, so the inverse is to divide that. Those will cancel because any number divided by itself is 1. And then we're going to divide our circumference by 3.14. So use your calculator. 100.48 divided by 3.14 gives you 32. So 32 equals, and then we've still got the D for diameter. So our diameter is 32. Now, if the question was asking us for the radius, we would only have one extra step, which would be to divide that diameter in half to find your radius. Okay, go ahead and pause your video. I want you to try examples 8 and 9. Before you do that, take note. They are giving you the circumference and asking you to find the radius, and that is the case in both of these two problems. So pause your video and go ahead and try 8 and 9. Okay, so to find circumference, we do C equals pi D. So it's telling us in number 8 that our circumference is 81.64. Pi is 3.14. And the formula that I'm using says we find the diameter, but don't forget up here what we're actually solving for. So to get the diameter by itself, our variable D, we're going to divide by 3.14 on both sides of our equation. Using our calculator, we'll do 81.64 divided by 3.14, which gives us 26 equals D, which is our diameter. However, we can't stop there on this one because it is asking for our radius instead of the diameter. So remember that your radius is half of your diameter. So half of 26 is 13. So our radius would be 13. In number 9, it's telling us our circumference is 100.48. So we're going to use our C equals pi D again. So our circumference is 100.48. Pi is 3.14 times D. So to get our diameter by itself, we're going to divide by 3.14 on both sides of the equation. Using our calculators, we'll do 100.48 divided by 3.14, which gives us 32 equals D. However, the question is asking us not for the diameter, but for the radius. So our radius is half of the diameter, so 32 divided by 2 gives us 16. So our radius is 16. Okay, this is our last question, so go ahead and pause your video and try example 10. Same type of question here. It's telling us that the circumference is 213.52. So I'm going to put that for C, 213.52. Pi is 3.14 multiplied by the diameter. So to get that diameter by itself, we've got to divide by 3.14 on both sides of our equation. So go ahead and use your calculator. You're going to do 213.52 divided by 3.14, which gives you 68. Go back and look at your question. Is it asking for the diameter or is it asking for the radius? This one is asking for diameter, so there's no need to do anything further than what we have done. So we would stop here at 68 is the diameter. Okay guys, that completes today's lesson. You will do your assessment on IXL AA6. If you have trouble finding that, if you'll scroll all the way down past Z, you will find AA6. Make sure you go through ClassLink. That is a big deal. Go through ClassLink to log into IXL. Otherwise, I will not be able to see your scores and you're going to have zeros as grades. So make sure you're going through ClassLink to log in. Also, once your grade is high enough on IXL that you feel that that's the highest you can get it, you're free to just close out of it. You don't have to do anything. You just close out and it will save that score for me.